I'm Lauren Bennett, 35 years old, and I never thought I'd be standing outside my own front door dressed in black, unable to get inside. Just 2 days earlier, I buried my husband. Now the key I'd used every day for 7 years didn't fit the lock. Inside, I could hear the sound of boxes being unpacked, familiar voices moving through rooms I helped build. My mother-in-law opened the door with a calm stare and said, "This house belongs to family now." I didn't speak. I just looked at her and nodded. Before I go any further, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt pushed aside by the very people who should have stood by you. I grew up in Vermont, the only child of 2 school teachers. We didn't have much, but our home was full of books, warm meals, and long walks in the woods behind our house. My parents raised me to believe in doing the right thing even when it's hard. That hard work pays off. That love is something you tend, not just feel. I met Michael Bennett during grad school at Cornell. We were both in the architecture program, both obsessed with preserving old buildings. He was sketching the front of a worn-down Victorian in the library when I first saw him, head-tilted pencil, moving slow and steady. From the start, it felt like we were 2 halves of the same plan. We talked about building a life together the way some people talk about restoring a landmark carefully, piece by piece, with respect for the history. After 18 months, he proposed. It was October. The trees were on fire with color, and he got down on one knee at the estate we were researching for our thesis. We married the next spring. A small ceremony, just close friends and family. Michael's parents were there, but his mother Patricia kept her distance. She smiled for the pictures, but it never reached her eyes. At the time, I had my own interior design business starting to take off. Michael had just landed a role at a respected firm that specialized in restoring historic buildings. We weren't rich, but we were stable, and we shared the same dream to buy an old home and bring it back to life. We found a 3-story Victorian with rotting porches and a sagging roof. It was perfect. We put down $80,000, half of that from my savings, and spent every spare hour fixing it up. I poured in over $60,000 more over the years, all documented, every receipt, every paint swatch, every invoice. That house became our heart. Every room told part of our story. Michael's brother Brian visited a few times. He always had a comment about how easy we had it. "Must be nice," he said once, sloshing his drink at Thanksgiving. "You just show up and everything falls into place." What he didn't see were the late nights, the missed vacations, the loans we paid off early. His wife Angela followed Patricia's lead, always polite, always distant. Then last spring, Michael started getting headaches. We thought it was the stress, his job, the 3rd floor remodel. I made him go in for a scan. That's when we learned he had a tangled mass of blood vessels in his brain, something he'd had since birth and never known. They scheduled surgery, but before it could happen, he collapsed at the kitchen counter. Just like that, everything stopped. I stayed at the hospital for 23 days. I barely slept. I held his hand, read aloud, talked to him about our next project, the screened-in porch, the side garden. On the 24th day, he opened his eyes. He tried to speak. His voice slurred. "Make sure you're protected," he whispered. "Everything's yours. Don't let them." That was the last thing he said. He was gone by morning. The funeral planning blurred into phone calls and forms and condolences that felt more like scripts than comfort. Patricia and Brian kept whispering, pausing when I came close. Her husband Richard barely looked at me. I told myself it was grief, that we were all shattered in different ways. I came home that night with nothing on my mind but rest. My key wouldn't turn. The door swung open before I could knock. Patricia stood there, arms crossed, as if she'd been waiting. Behind her, I saw boxes open, half-packed, some already labeled. One of them said Anderson Family Office. I stepped forward, confused, still holding the key that no longer fit the lock. "This house belongs to family now," she said, not moving from the doorway. I stared at her, thinking maybe I hadn't heard right. What? What are you doing? Brian appeared in the hallway holding a folder. He handed it to me like it was nothing. "This is Michael's will," he said. "Made before you two were married. It leaves everything to the family." I opened it with shaking hands. The date on the first page was from nearly a decade ago, years before we even met. It was missing pages, poorly photocopied. My name wasn't on a single line. "This isn't valid," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "We updated our wills together. Our house, my name is on the deed." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "How convenient," she said. "No one's ever seen this so-called updated will." Brian stepped forward again. "Let's be honest, Lauren. You married into money. Michael had a name, a future, and you came from nowhere." I blinked, caught off guard. "That's not true," I said. "I paid half the down payment. I paid for the renovations. If you'd given him children," Patricia said maybe things would be different. It landed like a slap. Behind her, I saw Angela folding up a pile of Michael's architectural sketches. Some of them we had worked on together. Our neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, was walking past. She slowed down when she saw me on the porch, then stopped altogether. "You have 1 hour," Patricia said, checking her watch. "You may pack a suitcase. That's it. This is my home." "It was," she said, "but Michael is gone. You are no longer part of this family." I stepped into the house like I was walking into someone else's life. Every room felt smaller. Angela stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching me. I went into my bedroom, and opened drawers without thinking. My wedding album was gone. The quilt Michael's grandmother gave us was already folded and sitting by the front door. Patricia picked it up herself like she was reclaiming it. My laptop missing, my design binder's client notes receipts gone. I packed a few clothes, some toiletries, a couple framed photos they hadn't gotten to yet. The rest I wasn't allowed to touch. 57 minutes after I walked in, I was back outside with one suitcase in my hand. That night, I slept in my car, a shopping center parking lot on Route 19. I didn't cry, not really. I just stared through the windshield, feeling like the ground had dropped out from under me. By sunrise, I had less than $2,000 in my checking account. No home, no access to our joint bank, no copies of anything that could help me fight back. I called Olivia. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me where you are," she said. "I'm coming." When she pulled up, she didn't say anything at first, just hugged me for a long time and helped me load my suitcase into her trunk. "You're staying with me," she said. "We'll get you a lawyer." Her apartment was small, just one bedroom and a pull-out couch, but it was warm and safe, and it smelled like coffee. I don't know how I would have made it through those first days without her. The next morning, we sat across from a legal aid attorney named Justin. He looked tired. His desk was stacked with papers, coffee-stained folders, and an old computer that kept freezing. He listened carefully as I explained what had happened. When I finished, he sighed and leaned back. "If your name is on the deed as joint tenants with right of survivorship, you should legally own the home," he said. "But if it's tenants in common or worse only in his name, it gets murky. Do you have a copy of the deed?" "No," I said. "It's in the house, with everything else." "Then we're going to need to work backward," he said. "Financial records, proof of your contributions, anything." He was kind but honest. Without documents or access to funds, we were at a disadvantage. And every day that passed, Patricia had more time to destroy or hide what we'd built. I tried to withdraw cash from our joint account. The teller said it had been frozen, pending probate. I would need the death certificate, which hadn't come through yet, and legal paperwork that would take weeks or months. The next day, I went back to the house to ask for my medication. Brian opened the door and didn't let me pass the entryway. "You need to stop showing up here," he said loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You've got no claim. We explained that already. My blood pressure meds are in the bathroom." He shrugged. Should have packed better. Maybe next time don't marry up. He shut the door before I could answer. That night I saw photos online, Angela and Patricia, in what used to be my office, captioned "Reclaiming the Anderson Legacy." They'd gone through everything, posted it for people to see. Friends and clients we knew had liked the post. I saw the word temporary in one of the captions, like I was a placeholder, not a wife. A week later, Patricia hosted a private memorial at the house. I hadn't been invited. Photos started popping up online. Guests gathered in the living room under the chandelier. Michael and I installed ourselves. Our wedding photos were gone. The mantel now held only Anderson family portraits. Someone posted a shot of the kitchen. I had chosen every cabinet in that room. The banner said, "Remembering our Michael." They had scrubbed me out of the story entirely. Then I saw at Brian listing Michael's Mustang for sale. The '67 coupe we restored together the first year we moved in. The caption said, "Estate sale, Anderson family collection." I kept staring at the screen, feeling like something was slipping further away each time I looked. Legal aid sent a letter demanding they stop selling off assets, but the reply that came back called me a former daughter-in-law. They said I was harassing the family, that I needed to return Michael's grandmother's ring, the one I'd worn since the day we married. At work, I was falling apart. Missed deadlines, skipped meetings. Marco, my boss, pulled me aside. "You're not okay," he said gently. "Maybe it's time to take some leave." I nodded. I didn't tell him I couldn't afford a single missed paycheck. 3 weeks after the funeral, Olivia showed me another post, Angela standing by the fireplace during the memorial. The caption read, "Family First." I stared at the image, remembering the night we lit that fire for the first time. When I went online later that evening, I found listings for Michael's workshop tools. His father had started selling them off piece by piece. The chisels he used to shape wood, his measuring tools, even the antique level he found at an estate sale. The final straw came a few days later. I visited his grave. There was already a headstone. Michael James Anderson, beloved son and brother. Nothing about being a husband. I stood there for a long time looking at the stone. The ground was still soft. The flowers had already wilted. I sat down on the grass, and for the first time in weeks, I stopped trying to keep it together. I asked him for a sign, anything. I needed to know whether it was worth fighting for what we'd built. The next night, I found the key. It was late. Olivia had already gone to bed, and I was sitting on the floor with a box of the few things I'd managed to take from the house. Mostly framed photos, a couple scarves a book Michael gave me our first Christmas. I picked up a picture of the two of us standing in front of the house with paint on our clothes and sunburned faces. It was from the first summer we lived there. I turned it over thinking maybe I'd written a date on the back. Instead, the frame slipped from my hand and hit the floor. The glass cracked clean down the center. I started picking up the shards when I noticed something taped to the back of the cardboard, a small key with a plastic tag. It had a number written in Michael's handwriting, but not one I recognized. I held it for a while, running my thumb over the tag, trying to think. Then I remembered how he labeled things. Michael used dates for everything when we met, when we moved, when we signed the lease on our first apartment. I looked at the number again, then typed it into a map app on my phone, just in case. There was a storage facility a few blocks from that first apartment. Same numbering system. Unit 328. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I took 2 buses across town, waited for the office to open, and walked up to the front desk holding the key like it might break in my hand. The woman at the counter asked me for the name on the account. "Michael Bennett," I said. She typed for a minute, then looked up. "This unit's paid through next year," she said. "Do you have ID?" I nodded and slid it over. "He listed you as the only authorized person after him," she said, handing me a clipboard. The lock clicked open with a soft turn. Inside was one fireproof lockbox and a plastic bin sealed tight. I knelt down and opened the box first. On top was a letter with my name in Michael's handwriting. Underneath that, documents folders, a small black USB drive labeled, "Watch Me, Lauren." The letter was short. He had written it after his diagnosis. He explained that the updated will hadn't been finalized, but that he had documented everything in case his family tried anything. He told me not to give up, that the house, the accounts, the life we built, they were mine. I sat there for a long time holding the pages. Later that afternoon, I went to a quiet coffee shop with decent Wi-Fi and plugged the USB into my laptop. The video loaded quickly. Michael sat in our office. My fabric samples were still hanging on the wall behind him. He looked calm, like he'd thought carefully about every word. "This is Michael Bennett. It's March 14th, 2024. He spoke for nearly 25 minutes. He went over the deed, the bank accounts, our financial contributions, how we'd both paid into everything equally. He named me as the sole beneficiary of his estate. He said clearly that we were partners in every sense. Then he addressed his mother directly. "She has never accepted Lauren," he said. "But that doesn't change the truth. We built this life together." The USB also held scanned emails between him and our estate attorney. Appointment confirmations, draft documents. There were even journal entries notes he'd written about arguments with Patricia, about her suggestions that he find someone more suitable. One spreadsheet tracked every dollar I'd put into the house, mortgage payments, renovation expenses, all with attached receipts. By the time I shut the laptop, I had everything I needed. I took digital copies of every document and stored them on 3 separate cloud accounts. Then I called a new attorney. Her name was Catherine Reynolds. She picked up on the second ring. Within 5 minutes, I was emailing her PDFs. By the end of the call, she'd already started outlining our next steps. "This is strong," she said. "It's going to take some time, but we have a case." We spent the next few days building a record, every payment I'd made, every receipt I could recover from email. I reached out to contractors who'd worked on the house. Elena, our carpenter, remembered me writing checks directly from my business account. "You were on site more than most homeowners," she said. "I'll put it in writing." Catherine had me gather anything that showed community involvement emails from the Homeowners Association, correspondence with our neighborhood garden committee. I even found an old calendar entry from a design consult I'd hosted in our dining room. We added it all to the file. Then we contacted David Mercer, Michael's business partner. He called me back within an hour. "I've been trying to reach you," he said. Patricia came by the office, claimed she was entitled to Michael's share. I could hear the disbelief in his voice. "She said you two didn't have an agreement. But Michael and I set it up so that if one of us died, the other's spouse would inherit the shares. He wanted you to have it all." David agreed to provide a written statement. He also sent over copies of their partnership documents. Catherine began drafting a timeline, every incident, every asset taken, every public comment Patricia had made. I showed her the social media posts, the listing for the Mustang, even screenshots of Patricia's church group accusing me of manipulating Michael. She said we'd need to prepare for more of that. "They've been shaping the story for weeks," she said. "Once we file, expect pushback." I kept going. I called Michael's old friends from college. Some of them hadn't been around lately, mostly because of Patricia. A few remembered the wedding. One had saved a voicemail from Michael where he mentioned getting our wills updated. "I can send it to you," he said. It was slow, but the pieces were starting to come together. Meanwhile, Olivia drove me to therapy once a week. My counselor told me I was dealing with complicated grief. She said the trauma of losing Michael had been layered with displacement and emotional harm. Naming it didn't fix anything, but it helped to know it wasn't all in my head. At night, I still dreamed of the house. Sometimes I was inside, and every room looked like it used to. Sometimes I was locked outside watching strangers carry pieces of our life out the front door. Each day brought something new, Another item listed for sale. Another friend who quietly chose sides. Another message meant to shame or silence me. I kept track of all of it. Dates, times, screenshots. Catherine said the more records we had, the better. Then one afternoon the Callahans called. Our neighbors, the ones who'd seen me on the porch that first day. I just wanted to say we saw what happened, Mrs. Callahan said. And if you need us to give a statement, we will. She paused for a moment. We watched you and Michael build that place together. None of this is right. I thanked her, holding the phone close to my ear like her voice might somehow hold me together. The next morning, Catherine filed the first motion. She was calm, steady, precise. We requested an emergency injunction to stop the sale of any more property. She also filed for temporary possession of the house based on the deed. There was even talk of restraining orders, depending on how the Andersons responded. Before we ended the call, she said one more thing. We're going to need a strong statement from someone who saw how you cared for him. A doctor, a nurse, someone who was there. I reached out to Dr. Levinson Michael's neurologist. He remembered me immediately. You were with him every day, he said. Of course I'll write something. That night, I opened the video again. Michael's voice came through the speakers, clear, steady, certain. I watched it all the way through. Then I closed my laptop and sat quietly in the dark, holding the key that had led me back to him. Catherine moved fast after the filing. The first court date was scheduled within the week. She spent hours organizing affidavits, cross-referencing statements, pulling together a thick packet of evidence to submit with the emergency injunction. We also filed for a temporary restraining order, just enough to stop Patricia and the rest from moving or selling anything else until the deed could be reviewed by a judge. Every night I checked in with Olivia from the living room while she made tea. She had started leaving a blanket folded at the end of the couch without saying anything. I knew it was her way of helping me feel like I belonged. I started therapy twice a week. My counselor explained what I was going through, complicated grief, she called it, the kind that gets interrupted by trauma and never finds its way through. Each session gave me just enough space to take another step. One afternoon, Catherine handed me a stack of papers with a pen clipped to the top. These are witness statements, she said. We'll include them with our motion. Inside were notes from neighbors, contractors, and former clients. Elena's statement detailed my payments for the staircase restoration. David Mercer wrote about Michael's intentions for his firm backing up everything we'd said. There was one from Dr. Levinson, too. He described me as Michael's primary caregiver during his illness. Deeply involved, attentive, fully supportive, he wrote. Catherine nodded as she read it aloud. You've built a full picture, she said. Now we go on record. We filed everything the following morning. The sheriff delivered the paperwork to the Andersons at the house. Catherine had advised me to stay away that day. But a few hours later, I got a message from Mrs. Callahan. She didn't take it well, she wrote. Been pacing around on the phone since the deputy left. I waited through the weekend. On Monday, we walked into the courthouse. Catherine carried 2 thick binders under her arm. I wore the same navy dress I'd worn to our last anniversary dinner. Patricia was already seated when we walked in. Her arms were crossed and her lips pressed tight. Brian and Angela sat beside her. Richard, silent as always, looked anywhere but at me. Their attorney, a man named Whitfield, gave us a quick glance and returned to his papers. The judge, Harriet Monroe, took her seat without ceremony. She looked through the paperwork for a few minutes, flipping slowly. Then she set it down. This case appears to involve a contested deed and potential wrongful eviction, she said. Let's begin with the status of the property. Whitfield launched into a long explanation. Michael's earlier will, family history, the idea that I had coerced him into sharing the deed. When the judge asked for proof of that claim, he hesitated. We have family statements, he said. Catherine stood. Your Honor, we have a recorded video from the decedent made 3 months before his passing. It directly addresses his intentions. The judge allowed it. Catherine played the clip from the USB. Michael's face filled the courtroom monitor. He looked straight into the lens. "My name is Michael Bennett," he said. "This is a record of my estate wishes. Everything I own should go to my wife, Lauren." The courtroom went still. He listed the accounts, the property, the business shares, everything. Then he said, "If my mother contests this, let this video stand as proof that I was of sound mind and speaking freely." Patricia flinched. The judge took her time reviewing the remaining documents, our deed bank records, renovation receipts, sworn statements. After 2 hours, she set everything down. Based on the evidence provided, she said, "I am granting temporary exclusive possession of the property to Mrs. Bennett. I am also issuing a restraining order, preventing the Anderson family from removing or disposing of any additional assets until this case is resolved." Patricia stood suddenly, pointing across the room. "You manipulated him," she said. "You were never one of us." Court officers stepped forward. The judge didn't flinch. "This court takes a very dim view of self-help evictions," she said, "especially against a grieving widow. This behavior is unacceptable." As the Andersons were escorted from the courtroom, Catherine turned to me. "We've got momentum now," she said. "Let's keep going." That afternoon, we returned to the house with a court officer and a locksmith. The key turned smoothly. Inside, it was almost unrecognizable. Photos had been replaced, furniture moved, the walls painted over. Patricia's food filled the fridge. Her clothes were in the guest room closet. Her perfume lingered in the bathroom. Catherine had brought an inventory specialist. He moved from room to room, noting items that were missing: electronics artwork, framed certificates, even the antique mirror from the front hallway. "I'm seeing at least 70,000 in missing property," he said. "Maybe more." Catherine photographed everything. We took it room by room. In the dining room, only one chair from our original set remained. In the office, Michael's desk had been emptied. His journals were gone. In the master bedroom, the quilt from his grandmother was missing. The drawer where we kept our passports had been forced open, then emptied. We documented everything. The next hearing came 3 days later. Patricia's attorney claimed the items were family heirlooms being safeguarded. The judge gave them 48 hours to provide a full list and return anything that didn't belong to them. After court, Angela asked to meet. We sat down in a coffee shop 2 blocks away. She looked tired. Her voice shook a little. "She started planning this the day Michael collapsed," she said. "She told Brian you'd try to take the house." She had already talked to Whitfield. Angela looked down at her coffee. "She moved a lot of your things to a separate storage unit, said they were too valuable to leave behind." That night, I started getting anonymous messages from Patricia's church group. Accusations, insults, warnings. Catherine documented them all. The local paper ran a story the next day. They interviewed David, who confirmed everything Michael had said. After that, more people came forward. One woman sent me a photo from the wedding, said she remembered Patricia refusing to stand for a toast. Another forwarded an email from Michael describing his frustration with family interference. Catherine included every new piece in our growing file. Then Patricia filed a new motion. She claimed Michael had been mentally unwell for months, that the video wasn't reliable. We countered with records, signed contracts, published articles, emails with clients. He had been working at full capacity until the collapse. Each move they made, we met it head-on. Then Catherine uncovered emails between Patricia and Michael from years ago. In one, she told him to find a real wife, not a project. In another, she wrote, "If you had married someone like Angela, none of this would be a concern. Through it all, Olivia kept me grounded. She packed me meals when I forgot to eat and sat beside me when the nights were long. Sometimes we just folded laundry together in silence. It helped." One afternoon, I saw Brian near the courthouse. He looked at me and said quietly, "You won't win." I didn't flinch. "Michael chose me," I said. He looked away. 2 days after that hearing, Catherine's office received a court-approved order to begin recovery of property. We started with a full list of the missing items. I had documented what I could from memory, but it was the photos from our insurance binder, saved copies I'd scanned to email Michael that filled in the gaps. The next step was a visit to a second storage facility. Catherine had received an anonymous tip. The unit was under Richard Anderson's name, located across town, paid in full through the end of the year. The court granted us access accompanied by the special master assigned to the case. When the lock came off, I felt my stomach twist. Inside were dozens of labeled bins. My design portfolios, client samples, our wedding guest book, Michael's journals, the quilt his grandmother had made, even my grandmother's photo album, the one I kept in our nightstand drawer. There was no reason for any of it to be there. Nothing had monetary value beyond a few decorative pieces. These were personal things, things only I would want. Catherine carefully documented every box. The special master marked items for immediate return. Back at the house, I began unpacking them one by one. The photo album had been tucked beneath winter clothes. My studio blueprints, still in their shipping tube, were at the bottom of a bin filled with bubble wrap. It wasn't until I opened a flat cardboard box marked MISC that I found Michael's sketchbooks. His original drafts for the screened-in porch we'd started planning the summer before he got sick. I sat down on the hardwood floor and turned the pages slowly, each one filled with his handwriting. Catherine reviewed everything that night and added the recovered materials to our case file. The next morning, she scheduled depositions. Patricia was the first. It took over 2 hours, and by the end of it, she had contradicted herself on several key points. She claimed she believed Michael had been the sole financial contributor. Catherine slid a bank statement across the table. It showed a $40,000 wire transfer from my design firm account. She insisted I had never paid for renovations. Catherine presented 3 receipts, signed by contractors, each showing my name and payment method. Finally, Catherine read from an email dated 5 years earlier. If Lauren cared about family, she wouldn't be working so much, Patricia had written. You should reconsider this arrangement before you make her permanent. Patricia didn't say anything. Later that week, the court reviewed camera footage submitted by one of the neighbors. The recording showed Brian and Richard outside the house just past 2 a.m., loading bins and framed artwork into the back of an SUV. The footage was time-stamped, taken during the first week after I'd been locked out. It aligned with the disappearance of several key pieces, Michael's architectural awards, the antique drafting table we restored together, the set of watercolor sketches we framed for the living room wall. Catherine submitted the footage to the judge as part of our follow-up motion. That evening, as I returned from therapy, Brian was waiting outside the courthouse lobby. He didn't approach me, but he stared as I walked past. "You won't win against us," he said quietly. I stopped just long enough to answer. Michael chose me. He didn't respond. The next court session focused on property valuation. The inventory specialist confirmed that more than $60,000 in items had either been sold damaged or still hadn't been returned. Catherine listed each item by name. The judge asked for proof. We had everything cataloged: photos, insurance records, receipts, item descriptions, even serial numbers on certain electronics. Catherine didn't miss a beat. Then came a surprising turn. Angela contacted Catherine's office. She wanted to speak privately. We met in the back corner of a bookstore cafe. She looked thinner than I remembered. "He started this the day Michael was hospitalized," she said. "Your name came up, and Patricia said she wasn't going to let the house fall into your hands. She'd already contacted Whitfield." Angela paused, then opened her purse. Inside was a flash drive. "These are copies of emails. I kept them. They showed Patricia coordinating the storage unit, messaging relatives to come pick up family heirlooms, even an email to a cousin offering to remove Lauren's presence from the property completely. Angela also admitted that several items had been gifted to extended family. She named names, dates, even locations. Catherine followed up. Most of them returned the items voluntarily once they saw the court's findings. Books, decorative ceramics, a few of Michael's rare tools. One relative mailed back a framed print of his early designs, still bubble-wrapped. Each return felt like a slow undoing of something that had been carelessly unraveled. As we closed in on the final hearing, Catherine prepared a summary motion. It included the video, the deed, the updated financials, the recovered property list, and the footage of unauthorized removal. The damages estimate climbed into 6 figures. Patricia submitted one last attempt, an affidavit claiming Michael had expressed doubts about me to her in private. Catherine responded with 3 separate statements, one from David, one from Michael's therapist, and one from his assistant at the architecture firm. Each one confirmed his trust in me both professionally and personally. That weekend, I changed every lock in the house. The locksmith arrived early. We walked from room to room, swapping out keys, replacing hardware. He handed me the new master set in a plain envelope. When he left, I walked through each room, closing closet doors, straightening the frames, checking drawers. The house was still scarred in places, scratches on the floor, a dent in the wall where Michael's tool shelf used to be, but it was ours again. And as I stood in this kitchen, I felt something settle. The final hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early fall. The air had that shift to it, cooler, quieter, like the season was closing in. Catherine met me on the courthouse steps with a quiet nod. She carried a slim folder this time. Everything had already been filed. Now we waited. Inside, the Andersons were already seated. Patricia wore a pale gray jacket and kept her eyes forward. Richard sat beside her, stiff and unreadable. Brian leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. The courtroom was still almost hushed. When Judge Monroe entered, she didn't waste time. She addressed the room with a calm, even tone. "This court has reviewed all submitted evidence," she said. "This includes the deed, the recorded statement from the decedent, the witness testimony, financial documentation, and recovered property records." She paused for a moment, flipping through her notes. "In the matter of property ownership at 78 Maple Street, the court finds in favor of Lauren Bennett." Catherine placed her hand lightly on mine. "The deed establishes clear joint tenancy with right of survivorship," the judge continued. "There is no legal ambiguity. This house belongs solely to Mrs. Bennett." She turned toward Patricia. "What the court finds more troubling," she said, "are the actions taken by the Anderson family following Mr. Bennett's death." She listed them one by one: the lock changes, the removal of personal property, the false statements used to delay legal process, the unauthorized sale of estate assets. The emotional toll of it all showed on Patricia's face, though she didn't speak. Richard remained motionless. Brian stared at the judge without blinking. "I am awarding damages to Mrs. Bennett in the following amounts," Judge Monroe said. $37,000 for wrongful eviction, $45,000 for emotional distress, $62,000 for unrecovered or damaged property. She also ordered full repayment of legal fees. The special master would continue overseeing property returns with penalties applied for anything else that remained missing. The conduct here, the judge said finally, was not only unlawful, but deliberately cruel. This court finds no justification for the actions taken against the surviving spouse of the deceased. There was no outburst this time, no shouting across the aisle, just a long silence before the judge rose and exited through the side door. Afterward, outside in the hallway, Catherine and I stepped to the side to give the Andersons space to leave. Patricia passed by without looking at me. Her heels clicked evenly down the tile floor. Richard followed, then Brian. That afternoon, the bank released the frozen funds from our joint accounts. They included a letter of apology and a statement confirming I'd been entitled to access from day one. They also paid interest penalties for the hold. The insurance company processed the life policy shortly after. It was the last of the paperwork Michael had set in motion before his collapse. Word spread through the community within a week. The article in the local paper quoted directly from the judge's ruling. The words deliberate and unconscionable stood out in bold. People I hadn't heard from in months began reaching out. Some offered apologies. Others shared stories of what Michael had said about me when I wasn't around. He always lit up when he mentioned you, one woman wrote. We should have known better, another said. I'm sorry we didn't speak up sooner. The following Saturday, Olivia helped me carry in the last box from storage. It held the stained glass lamp we found at a flea market on our first anniversary. She set it on the side table, plugged it in, and stepped back. There she said, "Now it feels like home again." I stood in the doorway, looking around the room. The furniture had been rearranged. The air smelled like paint and new wood. But the bones of the house were still the same. Our house. That same week, the special master scheduled the final property return. Patricia arrived with a moving truck and 2 men hired to unload. She wore sunglasses even though the sky was overcast. She didn't speak until the last box had been placed inside. She walked up to the porch holding a small wooden box. These belong to Michael's grandmother, she said. Jewelry. The court says they're yours now. I accepted it and nodded. You've won, she said after a long moment. You've taken everything that mattered. I didn't respond right away. Then I said, I didn't take anything. I kept what was already mine. She didn't reply, just turned and walked to the car, her coat catching in the breeze as she opened the door. 2 weeks later, Brian asked to meet. He chose a neutral place, a coffee shop near the library. He looked different, smaller somehow. I owe you an apology, he said. I knew Michael wanted everything to go to you. He told me last Christmas. I didn't speak up because, well, I didn't know how to go against her. He stirred his coffee slowly. Angela left me. She said we crossed lines that decent people don't cross. He didn't ask for forgiveness, just said what he came to say. As I left, he stood and held the door open. That weekend, something unexpected happened. Michael's old college friends showed up with ladders, sandpaper, and paint cans. We're fixing the floors, David said, and the cabinets, and whatever else needs undoing. 12 people worked all day, Saturday and Sunday. They patched holes, repaired trim, and replaced the front door frame. At some point, Olivia brought sandwiches and lemonade, and we all sat on the front steps like it was a summer picnic. In the back of one closet, someone found a box of photos that Patricia had tried to tear. They were bent, but not ruined. One of them was from our honeymoon, Michael and I sitting on a stone wall in Santorini arms, wrapped around each other, the Aegean behind us. I added it to the mantel that night. The next day, the special master delivered the final report to the court. Everything that could be recovered had been returned. Financial penalties were processed. The case was closed. But the story wasn't over yet, because the next chapter, what I chose to build from the pieces they couldn't destroy, was just beginning. The week after the final ruling, I met with the contractor to assess the damage. He walked through the house, slowly, clipboard in hand, pausing at each scratch and stain. The hardwood floors had been gouged where furniture was dragged. The carpets in the den were marked with deep wine stains that hadn't been cleaned. The kitchen cabinets, custom-built by Michael, had been chipped along the edges, one door left hanging crooked. These can be repaired, the contractor said. It'll take time, but we can bring it back. We scheduled the work to begin the following Monday. That weekend, a moving truck pulled into the driveway. Patricia stepped out with a clipboard and a carefully packed set of labeled boxes. She stood near the porch arms folded while the workers carried each container inside under the supervision of the special master. When the last one was unloaded, she approached me. She held out a small wooden box. "These are the rest of Michael's grandmother's jewelry," she said quietly. "You'll need to sign for them." I opened the lid, recognizing the pieces immediately. A delicate gold locket, a set of matching earrings, and the slim wedding band that had belonged to his grandmother. When I looked up, her eyes didn't meet mine. "You've won," she said after a pause. "You've taken everything that mattered." I didn't answer at first. Then I said, "I'm keeping what we built. That's what Michael and I always intended." She stood there for another moment, then turned and walked down the steps. The truck doors closed behind her. 2 weeks later, I received an envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a folded letter and a check for $500. The note was from one of Patricia's cousins. She returned a set of hand-painted plates I'd bought for our 10th anniversary dinner once. Patricia had passed off as heirlooms during the dispute. I didn't know the note said, "I'm sorry for what you were put through." Others followed. Over the next month, small packages arrived: ceramic vases, framed prints, personal books that had been removed from the house and quietly returned. Many included notes. A few came anonymously. One was hand-delivered by a woman I didn't recognize who said softly, "This was yours." Some of the items held no monetary value, but they'd been part of our life together. Each one felt like a thread being tied back where it had once been cut. Michael's college friends came back again to finish the restoration project. They replaced trimmed, touched-up paint rehung fixtures that had been removed. David brought a replacement drafting table and set it up in the office. "Michael would have wanted you to have this space back," he said, adjusting the level. During cleanup, someone found 2 more hidden boxes wedged behind the basement furnace. Inside were more of Michael's tools. One still had the tag from the estate sale Patricia had held, unopened. We inventoried everything and updated the records with the court. A few days later, Richard sent a short letter. It was typed, brief, careful. "While I cannot speak for my wife," he wrote, "I acknowledge that our actions taken in grief caused harm. I regret not doing more to prevent it." The scholarship in Michael's name is a generous and fitting tribute to the values he held. Catherine had helped me set it up earlier that month, the Michael Bennett Scholarship for Historic Preservation. It would support students at our alma mater, those working at the intersection of design and history, just like we had. The seed money came from the settlement. I never touched the rest. I didn't need it right away. By then, I'd returned to work. Marco welcomed me back with quiet relief and didn't ask too many questions. He handed me a fresh portfolio and gave me space. Within a few months, he offered me a partnership. "Clients are asking for you by name," he said. "Your experience matters now more than ever." I accepted. It gave me the structure I'd been missing and a way to keep moving forward. That same week, Grace reached out. She'd moved into a new apartment after finalizing her divorce from Brian. She asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. She brought a bag with her containing a few of my personal photos she'd quietly kept from being destroyed. They were in protective sleeves. I couldn't stop everything she said, but I didn't want to lose these. She stayed for over an hour. We talked about how isolating the family had been, about how it hadn't just been about me, but about years of control and fear. "I used to think I didn't have a choice," she said. "Watching what they did to you made me realize I do." We saw each other again a few weeks later, not out of obligation, just because it felt easy. My parents finally flew in that spring. They hadn't seen the house since everything had been returned. My father stepped into the hallway and paused. He looked around at the rebuilt moldings, the refinished floors, the photos on the mantel. "You've done what Michael would have wanted," he said. "You've made it fully yours without losing him in the process." The garden had become the final piece. Michael had labeled the sketches Future Garden Plan and tucked them into a folder we'd once stored in the kitchen. With a local landscaper's help, I planted everything according to his design, then added my own touches along the path. A bench near the back wall, a section of perennials he'd never picked out, a patch of native grasses that rustled when the wind came through. By midsummer, it had filled in. Friends visited, neighbors stopped by. Olivia came often, sometimes with takeout, sometimes with updates on her next hiking trip. She still had a key. "Don't get too comfortable," she joked one night, nudging me with her elbow. "You're not allowed to become one of those quiet, genius, recluse types." We laughed about it sitting under the patio lights with mugs of tea. I still had dreams. Not always sharp, not always painful, but reminders of the kitchen, of the office, of a lock that didn't turn. I'd wake up, walk to the back porch, and sit for a while with a blanket over my shoulders. Some mornings I'd bring out one of Michael's old architecture books, open it to a familiar page, read a line or two under the soft porch light. They weren't moments of sorrow anymore, just conversations across time. By the time summer faded into fall, the garden had fully taken root. The Japanese maples we planted our second year in the house cast long shadows across the patio by late afternoon. The climbing roses, the ones I added to Michael's original sketch, curled along the trellis in soft pink waves. I'd sit out there most mornings now with coffee in hand, watching the light move across the stones we laid together. It had been just over a year since Michael passed. A year since everything I thought I could count on fell apart, then slowly, piece by piece, came back into focus. The legal battles were behind me. The court orders had been carried out. The property was mine. My name, my deed, my home. But justice hadn't just come from the ruling or the settlement. It came from what grew after, from the work I put into rebuilding not just the house, but the rhythm of a life I could live in. The scholarship we set up in Michael's name had started receiving its first applications. I read each one carefully, students who reminded me of us, eyes on the past, hands steady in the present. It felt like planting something in soil we'd once turned together. At the design firm, things had shifted too. I found myself working with couples trying to preserve not just spaces, but intentions. I gently ask about paperwork, joint ownership, long-term planning. Clients listened more closely when I spoke from experience, even if they didn't know the whole story. Grace and I stayed in touch. We met for dinner every few weeks sometimes, just for a walk through the neighborhood. She shared more over time how her own marriage had unraveled, how loyalty had been confused with silence for too long. Her honesty gave me something I hadn't expected, a kind of shared healing. Even Richard, months later, sent a second letter, handwritten this time. He said he wished he had stepped in sooner, that he hoped someday I'd think of him not only as a man who failed to act, but as one who tried to make amends in the small ways left to him. I kept the letter in the same drawer as Michael's. Two versions of the same family, one built on control, the other maybe on late-earned clarity. Olivia remained constant. She still dropped by with Thai food, still teased me about my overgrown rosemary bush, still kept a spare key in her glove compartment. We had been through something together. That kind of friendship doesn't fade. As for the house, every corner now held something reclaimed or replanted. The front hall smelled of fresh pine from the new banister. The study had a new light fixture, but Michael's drawing still hung on the walls. I didn't erase him. I let him stay in the details. There's a kind of peace that comes after surviving something you weren't sure you'd make it through. Not loud or showy, just quiet, strong, like walking barefoot across wood floors you once thought you'd never see again. I don't know what's next, but I know who I am now. Not just a widow, not just a woman who fought to keep her home, but someone who learned fully what it means to stand up even when you're alone. What Michael and I built together didn't end when he died. It changed shape. It taught me how to protect the things worth keeping. If you've ever had to reclaim your place, your story, or your dignity from those who tried to take it, just know you're not alone. And if this journey meant something to you, I'd love for you to share it. Maybe subscribe, maybe just leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from, or who helped you hold on when it felt like everything was slipping away. Because in the end, family isn't just blood or name. It's the people who show up, stand beside you, and never let you forget who you are.